Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Honored guests and colleagues, I'm deeply honored to welcome you all here in Riga, especially our Ukrainian colleagues, at the opening session of the Justice Ministers informal conference here in Riga. And I would also like to inform everyone that the opening speeches will be open to the press and streamed to the internet. The conference will have both English and French interpreters, and I will also start with giving the floor to the President of the Republic of Latvia, His Excellency Edgars Rinkēvičs. The floor is yours.
Well, very good morning, Madam Minister, distinguished ministers, Madam Secretary General, President of the Parliamentary Assembly, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to Riga, and I'm very pleased to open this conference, a signature event during Latvia's presidency in the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe. The conference is a direct continuation of the Reykjavik summit that took place in May of this year. The focus of today's conference is the existential issue Europe is facing now, namely justice for Ukraine in the wake of Russia's aggression and full-scale military invasion. Before briefly addressing the central themes of the conference, I want to recall that the Council of Europe was the first international organization to decide on the discontinuation of Russia's membership. This principled position of our organization once again confirmed our commitment to democratic values and the international rule of law. It also affirmed that our organization is ready to assume a leading role in actively defending these values. Today's conference confirms that our commitment has not wavered. We seek justice for Ukraine. We stand with Ukraine as long as it takes. Ladies and gentlemen, during today's conference, you will address themes that represent pillars on which justice is built: accountability, resilience, and hope. First, accountability. Russia has brutally violated international law. It must therefore face full accountability. By full accountability, I mean both responsibility of Russia as a state and individual liability of those Russian officials who launched the war of aggression against Ukraine, those who committed war crimes and other most serious crimes of international concern. Russia must also bear full responsibility for the damage, loss, or injury caused to Ukraine and its people. I commend the Council of Europe for creating the Register of Damages. This is an important step towards a future international compensation mechanism. The Register of Damages will ensure proper registration and documentation of the devastation Russia has brought to Ukraine. I call on all countries that have not yet done so to join the register and demonstrate our solidarity with and support to Ukraine. During our presidency in the Council of Europe, Latvia has determined to advance the operational launch of the register. I welcome the intention of the ministers to adopt today a declaration containing principles that will guide the functioning of the register, or Riga principles. I particularly welcome the emphasis on a victim-centered approach. We must make sure that victims, in particular the most vulnerable, such as women and children, remain the focus of our efforts. Second, resilience. The justice system of Ukraine is currently bearing a heavy burden. It continues to ensure justice and rule of law, including through investigation of crimes committed by Russia. By continuing to uphold fair trial standards, Ukraine clearly demonstrates its values and the strengths of its democracy. I encourage member states of the Council of Europe to provide support to the Action Plan on Resilience, Recovery and Rebuilding of Ukraine. Latvia has already provided the financial contribution. And finally, hope. We all have heard and seen heartbreaking reports about Ukrainian children being forcibly and illegally deported to Belarus and Russia. We must do our utmost to ensure the return of these children, to ensure that they are reunited with their families. We must restore hope. Ladies and gentlemen, in Reykjavik, we committed to strengthening the role of the Council of Europe. We also reiterated our common resolve to unite around our values and standards. I'm very confident that today's conference will be an important contribution to our work for the benefit of all Europeans, including future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your opening speech and underlining the principles and values for our solidarity, for our responsibility. And today we are gathered here at the historical place called Hanzas Perons. This is a modern building today, but it has his historical character. This is a former warehouse building of the Riga goods station in the new Hansa area in Riga, which has taken a new form. And its history is a story about positive change, development and creating a space for cooperation. A story that alludes to the goals of the Riga conference, the goal of exploring how the Council of Europe can enhance its contribution in supporting Ukraine's justice system and re-establishing the international legal order by ensuring comprehensive accountability for the aggression of Russia. This conference stems from the Council of Europe summit in Reykjavik and will focus on how to put the decisions made there into practice. Even today, we are witnesses to the far-reaching and devastating consequences that terrorism and aggression has on us. This is something that cannot be tolerated, and action needs to be taken. And that is why we are here, to look for ways how we can give support, how we can combat the crime of aggression, and how to move forward. The Riga conference will comprise 3 sessions. Session 1, this session will be based around ensuring comprehensive accountability in the context of the Russian Federation's aggression and marking the launch of the Register of Damage. The register will serve as a record of evidence and claims for damage, loss or injury caused to all natural, legal persons, as well as the state of Ukraine. It is the first step towards an international compensation mechanism for all victims of this aggression. Equally important, Session 2 will address the support provided to the resilience of Ukraine's justice system during times of war and post-war reconstructions. We understand the critical role that a robust justice system plays, not only in investigating of Russia's war crimes and crimes against humanity, but also ensuring a successful transition to peace after the war. And finally, Session 3 will be dedicated to the topic of reuniting Ukrainian children with their families. Since Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russian soldiers have forcibly taken an estimated 19,000 Ukrainian children to Russia and Belarus. Children every day are stripped of their Ukrainian identity, exposed to military training, and to pro-Russian information campaigns amounting to targeted re-education. It is our moral obligation to do everything in our power to ensure that these children are reunited with their families, but Russia's crimes are brought to justice. Let me emphasize that challenging work begins now. Our response to Russia's aggression will not only shape the stability of Europe and the goal order, but also define us. It will define our commitment to our European values: human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, rule of law, and human rights. And at the end of the Riga conference, a political declaration might be adopted. So with that, I would like to give the floor to the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, Mrs. Maria Pecinovic-Buric. Please, Maria.
Thank you, Chair. President of Latvia, Ministers of Justice of the Republic of Latvia and Ukraine, Ministers and State Secretaries, Prosecutor General of Ukraine, Commissioner for Justice of the European Union, President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, distinguished guests. From the outset of the Russian Federation's illegal aggression last year, the Council of Europe has been clear that it will do all that it can to support Ukraine. The decision by the Latvian presidency of our Committee of Ministers to hold this informal conference is a welcome demonstration of our collective determination. We all wish for peace in Ukraine, but that peace must be sustainable. To be sustainable, it must be just. And to be just, it must have accountability at its core. At our summit of heads of state and government in May, European leaders were clear about this. Their Reykjavik declaration called for comprehensive accountability and specific steps. These included establishing a register of damage at the Council of Europe to record the loss and destruction being inflicted by Russia. 4 months later, the register has 44 members from across 3 continents so far. It has an executive director, a secretariat, and the second meeting of the Conference of Parties, held here tomorrow. It will take important decisions, notably for the establishment of its board, situated in The Hague, soon with an office in Kiev. The speed with which the register is taking shape shows our strong intent, and it will benefit from generous financial contributions for which I'm most grateful. The register is a first and necessary step towards any future compensation mechanism. On this, the Council of Europe is ready to contribute its expertise in whatever way is helpful. Similarly, on creating a special tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. European leaders were explicit. The Council of Europe should participate in consultations and negotiations and provide concrete expert and technical support. Our commitment is absolute. Tout comme l'est notre détermination.
As is absolute our resolve and determination to help Ukrainian authorities to ensure the efficiency of the judicial system of their country, given the challenges to which they are confronted. We are contributing to this thanks to our joint action plan on the resilience, recovery, and reconstruction of Ukraine. This joint action plan aims to ensure the independence and efficiency of the judiciary, the independence and efficiency of law enforcement, that it all be carried out in full respect for human rights. This action plan also provides advice on judicial reform, and it supports your work, Mr. Prosecutor General, when it comes to investigating the war crimes and the very serious violations of human rights perpetrated by Russia in keeping with the requirements spelled out in the European Convention of Human Rights. So that the obligation that there be accountability be honored. We are horrified by the illegal transfer of Ukrainian children towards Russia and Belarus. The Reykjavik Declaration has also given its support to measures to be taken in this area, so as to ensure that these crimes are investigated and that their perpetrators are punished. Our Committee of Lanzarote has identified the specific risks to which displaced children are exposed. Risks in terms of their deprivation of liberty, of their being separated from their family, of the lack of care afforded to them. This committee has sent urgent questions to the Russian Federation, which is still a party to the Lanzarote Convention and which is therefore still bound by the obligations stemming from the Convention. More generally, we have reacted to the request made by Ukraine by setting up an advisory group on the children of Ukraine, which will facilitate the exchange of information between member states on the legal and political frameworks that are needed for Ukraine to strengthen its protection of its children, and so that other European countries who have taken in refugee children coming from Ukraine to be in a position to meet these children's needs. The conference we're holding today will look at all these issues, and I would invite you to be very proactive, very concrete in the measures you suggest. Please look for the ways and means of contributing to the success of these different steps along this road that leads us to full recovery for Ukraine, and indicate clearly what more could be done according to you. Our joint efforts are necessary to repute and secure accountability in this situation, which is developing very quickly. Ukraine is counting on you and on us. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Yes, you of us. Dear Mr. Tine Cox, the President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Minister, and thank you, Mr. President, Madam Secretary General, dear all. Please allow me to begin with offering my condolences to all those who have become victim of this natural disaster that has hit Morocco, our state of Morocco, a natural disaster with an enormous consequences for those who live there. Let me now continue with the man-made disaster, the Russian aggression against Ukraine, to discuss that item. Thank you very much for inviting me to this conference as the President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. I would like to thank the Latvian presidency of the Committee of Ministers, the Latvian Ministry of Justice, and especially you, Madam Minister, for putting the issue of delivering justice to Ukraine so prominently in the Latvian presidency's priorities. Thank you very much for that. I'm pleased to represent our Assembly at this important conference, as it was our Assembly who first raised, already in April 22, the issue of accountability of the Russian Federation for all wrongful acts it committed in and against Ukraine. Back then, we adopted practically unanimously our 2 resolutions on the consequences of Russia's Federation's continued aggression against Ukraine and on accountability. There we set out a range of proposals calling for the establishment of a comprehensive system of accountability and justice for the crimes committed by Russia in and against Ukraine. These proposals included, for the first time since the beginning of the Russian aggression, an idea to set up a special ad hoc tribunal for the crime of aggression. These ideas then were considered by quite some as too controversial, too ambitious, and unrealistic. Today, fortunately, they have become mainstream thinking and are discussed in very practical terms at different international platforms. I'm grateful to see that quite many of these proposals are now being implemented, and I'm grateful to you, dear ministers, to the heads of states of the Council of Europe who endorsed them during the recent 4th Summit of Heads of States and Government of the Council of Europe, and to the entire Committee of Ministers for being bold and courageous in endorsing these ideas and working hard on making them reality. That's great. But further progress is urgently needed, as the war in Ukraine should never become a normality. We should never forget that while we are talking here today, people in Ukraine are suffering and dying every day. It is our obligation to do everything in our power to stop this war, to restore territorial integrity and national sovereignty of Ukraine, and to fully address the consequences of the Russian aggression, and by doing so, to do justice to all the victims. It is important that the first step in that direction is now already made. This is the creation of an international register of damage as part of a comprehensive system of accountability for violations of international law resulting from the aggression. And I applaud the team that has already started its work. Thank you very much. You may recall that our Assembly first called on Member States to establish such a register for damages in cooperation with the Ukrainian authorities in October 22. Within 8 months, we have outlined the role of the register in detail and in our resolution on that matter. We propose such a register to be established via a multilateral treaty or agreement open to all like-minded states in Europe and beyond, and supported by international organizations, including the European Union. We underline that it would be only a first step, but an absolutely essential one in the process of accountability for violations of international law arising from the Russian aggression. The register should create a record of evidence and claims for damage, loss and injury caused to all natural and legal persons in Ukraine, as well as to the state of Ukraine. Now, dear friends, we must work to complement the register with other vital elements that will provide for a comprehensive and holistic system of accountability of the Russian Federation for its wrongdoings in Ukraine. We envisage that at a later stage, an international compensation commission would be mandated to review and adjudicate the claims submitted and documented by the register, and that compensation awards would then be paid to successful claimants for a future compensation from a future compensation fund. And in the end, the bill has to be paid by those who created the aggression, the Russian Federation. Our Assembly proposes that the Council of Europe as a whole should play a leading role, as you said, Madam Secretary General, in setting up and managing this compensation mechanism, taking into account its comparative advantage and experience in delivering justice and compensation for human rights violations under the convention system. I wish to strongly encourage you, dear ministers, to build upon the success of the creation of the registry and, using the work done by the Assembly and the Council of Europe, to take necessary steps already now to ensure that the registry will be the foundation upon which other international institutions delivering justice to Ukraine and Ukrainian people will be built. This, of course, includes the urgent need to set up an ad hoc tribunal on the crime of aggression, the idea which was first put forward by our Assembly and subsequently fully endorsed by the heads of state of government in the 4th summit of the Council of Europe. May I invite you to consider measures that will ensure a meaningful and visible progress in the implementation of that summit's decision, and I can guarantee you that the Parliamentary Assembly will be 100% behind you and will offer you strong and active support in this endeavor. Finally, I'm certain that if we stand united with Ukraine, we will deliver the promises made in Reykjavik, and we will help to deliver justice to the Ukrainians and accountability for the Russian Federation multiple violations of international law, including of human rights law and international humanitarian law. The Assembly has and will always speak in support of developing and ensuring such effective functioning of a comprehensive system of justice for Ukraine, and will support the work of the Register as a first and most important step to achieve that goal. Thank you very much, Madam.
Thank you, Tini. And now it's a great honor to give the floor to Minister of Justice of Ukraine, to Mr. Denis Maluska. Denis, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear President, Secretary General, ministers, colleagues and friends, first of all, let me thank Latvia for organizing and hosting this wonderful event and putting Ukraine as a topic for our common discussions. We really appreciate and thank you for that. I'd also would like to take the opportunity to thank all of our partners, all member states, all our neighbors and countries helping us during this war. And on behalf of our government, of Ukraine's government, thank you for all the support you've provided, for all the assistance you've provided, for all the help, and without you, we wouldn't be able to actually fight and resist invasion of Russian Federation on Ukraine so successfully. So thank you again, much appreciated. And returning back to Ukraine and the topic of our discussions today, I'd like to emphasize that Ukraine is currently fighting two wars at the same time. First one is in all major world's outlets, on all TV channels, is fight with Russia. But the second one is significantly less visible. Ukraine is transforming itself significantly to the extent which never happened before. Ukraine voted, adopted, and implemented significantly more reforms, transformational reforms during the war than ever happened during all previous history of Ukraine. This both, shall be considered in the light of our attempts to start an accession process to European Union, and in order to be a member of European Union, one is naturally have to comply with all the standards and respect all values, particularly value of rule of law, but also we are meeting conditionalities of our partners, major international financial institutions, and countries who provide significant financial assistance to Ukraine. For instance, Ukraine is a unique country, a single country in the world, in which major officials and major bodies responsible for the area of rule of law are selected by a decisive vote of international organizations. So technically, our international partners could nominate and select and veto almost all major figures in the Ukrainian legal society. For instance, that could be said about High Qualification Commission of Judges, High Judicial Councils. Those are bodies responsible for any decisions within the judiciary, like nominating judges, appointing judges, selecting judges, firing judges, imposing disciplinary measures on judges. The same applies to National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine. The same applies to National Anti-Corruption Prevention Agency. And the recent reform, which happened just a couple of weeks ago, our judges of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine will also be selected, vetoed, and checked for integrity and qualification by a commission where representatives of international organizations have a decisive vote. What I'm saying about this is not that we are complaining about anything, but we are showing an ultimate level of transparency to our partners. We are open to show all our processes, how we work, how we struggle with internal and external difficulties, and that we are a good and reliable partner in a big European family. So just to show you one part of what is happening in Ukraine, but another one is more visible, and you know, of course, about that. We are in the war. A huge amount of war crimes were committed on the territory of Ukraine. Hundreds of thousands of people struggled and became victims of the war crimes or other crimes committed by Russian forces on the territory of Ukraine. And we are looking forward and call for creation of comprehensive mechanism in order to hold Russia responsible for what they've done on the territory of Ukraine. This includes not only criminal dimension, and here, of course, arrest warrant for Putin shall be mentioned as a major achievement, but also for further actions like creation of a tribunal for the crime of aggression, further proceedings in ICC and assistance to ICC, and also creation of compensation fund as a next step and compensation commissions as next step after what have been achieved at Reykjavik summit with the help and under the umbrella of the Council of Europe. So we are looking forward for further actions and tangible results so that our meetings, our discussions bring us to a visible sign that rule of law do exist, do matter, and really we could bring Russian top-level officials to responsibility for the crimes they committed. Thank you once again. Thank you for the support of Ukraine, and glory to Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Dennis. And now the floor I'm giving to the Prosecutor General of Ukraine, Mr. Andrei Kostin. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear Mr. President, Secretary General, Commissioner, dear Ministers, Your Excellencies, let me start with words of gratitude to the Ministers of Justice from Member States, to the Council of Europe and European Union for their continuous and unwavering support and cooperation with Ukraine since February 2022. It is fitting that we are in Latvia as we speak of the path to justice for Ukraine. Under Soviet occupation, Latvia also felt the consequences of campaign that aimed to break the identity of a nation by targeting terror and atrocities against regular people. Now we witness the history repeating itself. Due to the fact that Russia remained largely unaccounted for the atrocities it committed in the past. Though we have a long way to go to bring accountability to Russia for its aggression against Ukraine, we've also made real progress in advancing this cause. Not just in technical and legal aspects, but in uniting and strengthening our collective will to secure justice. As we always say, united for Ukraine, for me, means united for justice. We firmly believe that accountability is a precondition to just and sustainable peace and stability, particularly in case of the international crimes. Therefore, we strive to restore justice and break the cycle of impunity through individual and state responsibility. The International Criminal Court's arrest warrants for President Putin and so-called Child Commissioner Lvova-Belova have shown to everyone in the world that no one is or will be above the law. We will continue to hold perpetrators accountable for atrocities they have committed in line with the international law principles. You know, we say about this first arrest warrant as a historic, not only because it's about incumbent President of Russian Federation, incumbent President of the Permanent Member of Security Council of United Nations, but I will add, because of the extremely speedy level of response of the International Criminal Court. And I want to say the words of gratitude to prosecutor of the ICC and his team, Karim Khan, because they really changed the philosophy of the OTP of the ICC, because what we usually saw in the past was very long way. We have no right at our situation to deny justice for victims and survivors because this justice will be delayed. That's why another historic element of this arrest warrant is speed of our response. And I will also mention third historic element, which allows us to produce this first arrest warrant in such a speedy manner, is a unique level of partnership and cooperation between Ukrainian authorities and international organizations, International Judiciary Authority, as we know as ICC. Because of this cooperation, because of full transparency, I said it at several occasions, it took us 5 months to build this case to get first arrest warrant. Maybe never before in the history of the ICC. And we committed to go ahead for new cases, I hope new warrants, and I hope you will see fruitful results in coming time. Most importantly, the accountability begins with understanding and redressing the harm, the loss, and the damage caused to victims and survivors, as well as to the victim state. That is why the reparation is a legal obligation of a responsible state, Russian Federation, for the injury caused. The establishment of the Register of Damage with the Council of Europe's assistance is a first step towards an international compensation mechanism that can secure full reparation to all. Today's efforts are building blocks as we lay foundation for such a mechanism. The Ukrainian people can feel this progress. On our part, we aim to contribute to the process of reparation while being cognizant of the needs and sensitivity of the victims and survivors of atrocity crimes through proactive solutions. The National Register of Victims and Survivors of Atrocity Crimes being such an initiative of the Office of Prosecutor General of Ukraine. We are grateful to the Justice Ministers and the Council of Europe for addressing it within the declaration. We hope that the international community will aid us with laying it into practice. To rebuild Ukraine, to hold Russia to account, and to deter future acts of aggression, these are the tasks before us, and I look forward to discussing them with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrei. And concluding our opening speeches, I will give the floor to our good friend of the Council of Europe. As Council of Europe and European Union are working hands in hand in the ways to find how to bring Russia accountable. So it's my honor to give the floor to Commissioner for Justice of the European Union, Mr. Didier Reynders. Please, the floor is yours.
No, thank you very much, Mr. President of Latvia, dear Edgars, Madame the Minister of Justice of the Republic of Latvia, dear Ines, Madame Secretary General of the Council of Europe, dear Maya, Mr. the President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, dear Tini, Mr. the Minister of Justice of Ukraine, dear Denis, and Mr. Prosecutor General of Ukraine, dear Andrei, dear Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, it's a pleasure to be with you today to attend this informal conference of Justice Ministers of the Council of Europe. It's true that we have a good cooperation since the beginning of the war, but also before that, between the Council of Europe and the European Union. Today, we will discuss the next steps in our collective efforts to ensure comprehensive accountability for the crimes committed during Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. And let me start my intervention by expressing my admiration for the important role that the Council of Europe continues to play in advancing this cause. In this regard, I would like to congratulate you in particular on the historic Reykjavik summit that took place last May, and which displayed strong unity amongst member states to defend the organization's core values in these challenging times. As stated in the declaration that resulted from that summit, now is the time to remain determined to strengthen the free and open international order. In our struggle to uphold this order, cooperation and coordination at both a European and at an international level is key. The European Union will continue to be a reliable partner in further advancing this cause for as long as it takes. Within my function as European Commissioner for Justice, I have made the fight against impunity for alleged international crimes committed in Ukraine a top priority of my mandate. Since the start of the war, we have taken a number of strong and resolved steps in this regard. Firstly, we have ensured that relevant evidence can be effectively preserved. We have done so together with our agency, Eurojust, and the National Prosecution Services participating in the joint investigation team by setting up the International Center for the Prosecution of the Crime of Aggression against Ukraine, ICPA. And within the ICPA, the National Prosecution Services, supported by Eurojust, work closely together to make further progress in their investigations into the crime of aggression. We are also taking the first steps to further strengthen cooperation between the ICPA and the International Criminal Court, which remains the key international actor to investigate and prosecute the perpetrators of international crimes. Secondly, bearing in mind the unprecedented scale of international support for Ukraine, it is crucial that we ensure coordination of all various accountability initiatives. Therefore, in March of this year, the European Union launched a dialogue group together with Ukraine, the ICC, and the Dutch Ministry. Over 33 states and many international and regional institutions, including the Council of Europe, have since then joined the dialogue group. Thirdly, we have continued to support actors in the Ukrainian justice sector and provided them with the necessary tools to uphold and further strengthen the effective functioning of the criminal justice system in Ukraine in line with European human rights standards. Fourthly, we have, together with the Council of Europe and other partners, committed ourselves to ensuring that meaningful reparations will be made for the damage suffered by the Ukrainian people during this war. In this respect, I am happy to announce that the EU will contribute to cover the necessary expenses for the setting up of the Register of Damage, notably for procuring its facilities in The Hague and the development of the digital platform. We remain committed to support the register, which will function as a first important step towards a future international compensation mechanism. In this regard, we are continuing reflections on the potential change of the EU status to the register as participant. Permettez-moi de conclure mon intervention en répétant qu'il est de notre responsabilité commune.
Allow me to conclude my intervention by reiterating that it is our common responsibility to ensure that the atrocities committed in Ukraine do not go unpunished and that meaningful reparations for the damages suffered are assured. We count on your support to move forward towards achieving these objectives and ensuring the lasting enforcement of international justice.
accept the support, of course, to Ukraine, the military support, humanitarian support, financial support. We have two main goals: to be sure that we will have the possibility to organize, maybe with the actual jurisdiction, maybe with a new tribunal, the accountability for the crimes committed in Ukraine. And the second goal is to be sure that Russia will pay for the damage caused by the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Didier. So we have concluded our opening speeches, and before we start with our working session, I would really thank our President of the Republic of Latvia, Mr. Edgars Rinkēvičs, for being with us. Thank you, Mr. President. So, dear friends, after the opening